Okay, well, we're back to talk more about tariffs and why Trump suddenly wants to make America 1890 something again, right? Because it does seem like William McKinley, big tariff guy, big hero of Trump's, as per the inauguration speech, seems to be the man of the hour, an Ohioan like myself. But I don't remember William McKinley being like the featured Ohio president. Because the Gilded Age, I guess Trump wants to return to it, but maybe it's not that great. What do you think, Josh? I mean, you're our modern expert here, and I think the Gilded Age is modern enough. Was the Gilded Age as good as advertised?
Well, I mean, as I said in the last episode, if you happen to be Carnegie or Vanderbilt or Morgan or Rockefeller, yes, it was fantastic. And they made a lot of money. Um, for the working class, for the ostensible comparisons to the average Trump voter today, who's disillusioned with the state of our country and feels like they're not getting a fair shake. The people in the working class of the Gilded Age that we might compare them to, no, like it was not a great time at all.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's an understatement.
As the name implies, right? I mean, we kind of just talk about the Gilded Age without thinking about why it's called the Gilded Age. But what's gilded mean? It's like the gilded lily, right? Like it's gold veneer on a cheap underlying substance, right?
And so what are the kind of socioeconomic conditions that gave rise to this era? You have these massive waves of immigration coming,
right.
Primarily from Southern and Eastern Europe, and you have this working class that is incredibly fragmented, and kind of in cities, physically isolated in these ethnic enclaves. I mean, these people don't even speak the same language. This is, you think of like, I don't know, gangs in New York. I don't know when that takes place, but
that's pre-Civil War, but same idea, right?
Okay, yeah. But I'm trying to think of an example, like a popular example of like, you got the Irish living over here in this section of the neighborhood. You got the Italians over here. You got the Slavs over there. The Polish here.
Yeah.
Incredibly divided, incredibly fragmented, and not able to really have any voice against kind of the capitalist class running these factories, right?
Right.
There's a surplus of labor, so if you get an injury in a factory, there's no worker protection. You're gone, and the next guy at the gate is now hired for an incredibly low price. I mean, this is like the Jungle. We think of the Jungle by Upton Sinclair as this indictment of the meatpacking industry, which it is, but really it's a broader story about the struggle of the working class in I think like the early 1900s.
And these guys are called robber barons for a reason, right? Like,
yes.
The industrialists that are running these factories or owning these corporations, whether it's steel or railroads or whatever, like they're brutal dudes that are extracting as much profit from their ventures as they possibly can. This is runaway capitalism, so to speak.
Runaway, yeah, that's exactly what it is. And you get violent uprisings, you get mass upheaval, you get strikes. I mean, across the board, from the working class because they're struggling economically, and there's absolutely no social safety net to save them. This is why we get the progressive movement, in the early 20th century as a response.
Well, and we get 1890s, same era that we get the first like bona fide populist movement, and that's in the countryside, right? Like that's among the rural population that is upset. Yeah, that is upset with the same stuff, right? But they turn to kind of this populism, right? William Jennings Bryan, that kind of stuff. And it's different populism than what we see today in a way, but populism is an answer to this fraught runaway capitalism that is underserving most people.
And the fact that this, to bring it back to tariffs, I mean, the farmers are not benefiting from the tariffs of McKinley. So
That's right.
why are we talking about McKinley? Well, I mean, Trump certainly sees himself as McKinley 2.0, and the tariffs are, I think, a part of that equation. Like
Yeah.
McKinley has, like, I don't know the exact numbers, but it's like 50% tariffs basically on
Yeah.
everything.
Really high tariffs. I saw a political cartoon from the McKinley era, right? And of course, Mount McKinley is named at this time, right? It's the largest mountain in North America. They renamed the mountain that is called Denali Mount McKinley for William McKinley. But the political cartoon that I saw, is like Mount McKinley is the second tallest mountain in North America because the highest mountain is all of the tariffs, right? Like that's the play of the political cartoon. Um, and so people, mocked his tariff even in his own day, right?
And it disproportionately favored the kind of manufacturing base in the Northeast, right? I mean, and that, like, you can't really talk about the 19th century without, reconciling the division economically between the South and the Northeast
And the West and the Northeast.
Yeah. So, like, the farmers who are undergirding this populist movement are not benefiting from these tariffs to the same extent that the manufacturers are, that are kind of in the pocket of William McKinley. I mean, we have really lobbying starts in 1896.
Mm-hmm.
There's this guy, Mark Hanna, who is like the man behind the curtain, kind of calling the shots, really. I mean, it's like, again, is there a comparison there in the Oval Office?
Sure sounds like it. Yeah.
And that I mean, the other thing is, this may be a separate conversation, but like the Wizard of Oz is William McKinley,
supposed to be William McKinley, right?
right? And it's this idea that, like, the guy, the presentation of this guy is one thing, but who's actually behind the scenes pulling the strings? It's much more insidious. There's a lot to unpack there with McKinley, and I think the Wizard of Oz gets at that. But I mean, the parallels with Trump are kind of uncanny.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And we don't need to go there now. Maybe that's a separate conversation. But the bottom line, I think, with the Gilded Age that Trump's possibly trying to return to is that it's great if it's achieved and your name is Trump or Zuckerberg or Bezos or Musk. I mean, you're gonna increase your billions of dollars by more billions of dollars.
Yeah.
It's not great if you're a working class person.
Yeah. Well, and we were just having this debate before we started recording, right? But I think of McKinley as he's kind of the overripe part of the Gilded Age. Like, he's the end product that is still trying to ride the wave of the Gilded Age. But McKinley gets shot pretty early on in his what is that? It's his first term, right? When he gets shot, or is his second term? Second term, maybe.
I think so.
We should know that it's his second term. Yeah, because he's
assassinated.
No, that's right. He gets assassinated. It's his second term. Teddy Roosevelt is this young, dynamic vice president that then becomes president overnight. Comes down from a hike and finds out that he's going to become president. The shift there, like I think that ends the Gilded Age. Josh was just telling me that he doesn't think the Gilded Age is over at that point.
Well, yeah, I mean, certainly Teddy and then Taft go at, Teddy Roosevelt does kind of a 180 and decides to actually take on the oligarchs and undertakes this process of trust busting or breaking up the monopolies, and then Taft goes even further. But I do think, well, yeah, and it's like the progressive movement is a response, but to what extent does that change things economically?
And this is where I think you've got your point, Josh, right? Like, the economic through line of the McKinley era tariffs plays through the early decades of the 1900s, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a series of recessions that happen in the early 1890s, then early 1900s, and then 1921, 1920, 21.
Yep.
And then, I mean, it's more complicated than that, but yeah, like, economically, you don't see that major social socioeconomic shift until the Great Depression and the New Deal and FDR. That's when things really, really changed.
Well, and I think that's what we're talking about, right? Because we think of the Gilded Age, 1890s, as this kind of runaway capitalist era. Then fast forward, we're going to kind of have to like skip over World War I in a way to get to the Roaring 20s, right? This other era that is all about spending, all about glitz and glamour, right? Think about the Great Gatsby, right? When you think of Roaring 20s, think about gangsters in Chicago, whatever. But that's getting us into the 1920s, and all through that era, whether it's like Calvin Coolidge in the early 1920s, or then eventually Hoover in the late 20s, they're all still embracing tariffs as an economic policy. And the big one, right, the famous one that is supposed to be the problem solver for the economic woes of the day is the Smoot-Hawley tariff in 1930, right? So this comes into play in the middle of Hoover's presidency. It is, in a way, a response to the start of the Great Depression, right? So the collapse of the stock markets first started in kind of 1928, 29. Hoover does some things, but he's really kind of a bootstraps, hands-off Republican who doesn't want to tinker with the economy. The one way that these Republican presidents in the 20s tinker with the economy is through tariffs, right? So the Smoot-Hawley Act in 1930 is an attempt to protect American industry against competing foreign industries, but it's a total, it blows up in their face, right? Smoot and Hawley, the two authors of the bill, I think both of them lose re-election. Hoover, of course, loses his election in 1932, and then FDR comes in, right, as kind of the rejection of the Hoover era economic policies and a new democratic answer to how to fix an economy. And one of the key things, right, like we always think about the New Deal as a domestic thing, but one of the other factors in FDR's economic policy is to roll back all these tariffs. And that's where we get the Reciprocal Trade Agreement Act in 1934. So this is key to understand why Trump can even tinker with tariffs now. Up until this point, tariffs had been a legislative issue, right? Like even when Hoover's in charge, it has to be Smoot and Hawley, these two people in Congress, these two men in Congress that write the bill and come up with this congressional tariff. Now, right, in 1934, this Reciprocal Trade Agreement Act passes that power over to the president for the first time, in like a pretty universal way, so that Franklin Delano Roosevelt, as president himself, can negotiate reciprocal trade deals, free trade deals with specific countries as necessary, right? And so FDR uses this as basically a blanket way to roll back or reduce tariffs all over the economic world. And at that point, right, this is a key shift in the balances of power. Now the president has a direct role in how tariffs and trade agreements are going to kind of take shape going forward. And that matters, obviously.
And I guess,
yeah.
The one thing, I'll just add that that's all fantastic information. Now I'm going to, name check your era, but all of this kind of goes back to Hamilton, right? And
Yeah.
the idea that like we need, because you'll hear a lot of people today when talking about Trump saying, well, Lincoln was kind of authoritarian, like FDR was kind of authoritarian.
Right.
And what you're describing there in great detail is certainly you could interpret it that you could read it that way as like, wow, that's some executive overreach right there.
Well, FDR definitely falls in the camp of executive overreach, right? Like,
of course. And so, yes, it's almost an idea of national security in a way. Going back to Hamilton, right? Like you need tariffs, you need banks, you need infrastructure like canals to be self-sufficient
Yeah.
with the question of national security. Um, and then you kind of see this like strong central government play through and the way Lincoln handles himself, the way Teddy handles himself, the way FDR handles himself, and I think proponents would say the way Trump handles himself. Um, so, I mean, the one distinction there is that at least with Lincoln and FDR, I don't think there'd be much agreement that the nation in both scenarios was in a major time of crisis.
Yeah.
Civil War or the
Or the
Depression
Great Depression and then
leading
World
up to
War
World War
II,
II.
right? Yeah.
Um, are
Well,
we in a crisis right now? It seems like the idea is that idea is being manufactured.
a self-made crisis. Yeah, yeah. That I think that's right. That is also probably a topic for another episode, right? Um but there is that sense of that, like, Trump is responding aggressively to what he sees as a crisis, right? And apparently anything, can be a crisis, whether it's the fentanyl crisis or the immigration crisis, or in this case, like the trade war crisis that wasn't a crisis until Trump launched this trade war.
Right. Which does then bring up like, who is all kinds of countries are being affected, but really I think the most baffling one is our friends to the north, Canada, which I know as a Great Lakes guy yourself who's got a cabin there, like that's the one where it's like if you're gonna have a trade war with Mexico, I think people can understand, well, okay, I mean, yeah, like fentanyl, illegal immigration, sure.
Great.
Canada,
Yeah. Yeah, Canada's not China, right? Like, I think when Trump rolls out kind of the anti-China stuff on the campaign trail, he gets a lot of like cheers, right? Because China is this kind of adversarial um, world competitor with us, but Canada is like one of our longest term relationships in a positive way, right? And I find this, yes, right? Like, my family, we've gone to Canada since 1970, right? Uh, I have spent summers up there. My grandparents, originally bought and built cabins up there, and like the entire Nelson family from Ohio every year makes the sojourn up to Canada. And so it's near and dear to me, right? And it's hard to fathom an adversarial relationship between the Canadians and the Americans. But, right, like, it seems to be playing out that way now, right? We've had kind of sparring back and forth between Trump and Trudeau, and now Trudeau's government's gone, but the relationship is not any better since Trudeau has kind of stepped away, and Trump seems to be pushing the envelope, trying to antagonize Canada in this kind of trade war, and it's shocking to me personally. It's also shocking to me historically, right? Because Canada, I mean, we have, historically speaking, the U.S. did invade Canada twice, right? During the American Revolution and during the War of 1812. It didn't go well for the Americans either time. This is all part of, people forget this, but Canada is part of the British Empire, right? It's still part of the Commonwealth today, which is why, the king or queen is still, now it's the king. The queen and the king have been on Canada's money, but since at least the War of 1812, there has been kind of a positive direction between the U.S. and Canada relations, right? And I'm not going to read off all the treaties. I did look this up, right? But like, from 1817 on, every treaty with Canada has been kind of a positive treaty for both ends, where borders become more relaxed, trade relations become more smooth. There's like, by the 1840s, right? The Webster-Ashburton Treaty kind of establishes kind of regular relations between the Canadian and American forces. There's no militarized border from that point on. By 1909, there's this International Joint Commission with which, if anyone cares about the Great Lakes, that's where the Great Lakes kind of get, worked out jointly by the Canadians and the Americans, and they have this positive relationship from literally 1909 on. And then, of course, Canada's part of NATO with us. They're part of NORAD with us. All of these kind of international defense measures. The Canadians were with us in Afghanistan. They were with us in Iraq. And the Canadians have been constantly trying to remind Trump and the American government of this in the recent months with this escalating trade war. And that's why I think it's kind of shocking that Canada has fallen into this attack by Trump, that he's going to leverage tariffs and launch a trade war with our northern neighbor. I would also point out that Canada is our largest trade partner, right? So these tariffs are not going to be a small, the jokes about like, oh, we're going to have to pay more for maple syrup. It's like, no, we're going to have to pay more for cars and steel and everything else, right? Like Canada, there is a massive open border between the Canadians and the Americans. It's a demilitarized border. And for a long time, it's been a free trade border, right? So you can trade most things across that border without a huge amount of international import duties. But now that's going to change. And I think that's going to affect a lot more Americans than we realize, and a lot more elements of America than we realize.
Yeah, I mean, the one that comes to mind for me is lumber.
Yes.
Now I know that we're now finding out that maybe our national parks, or at least our federal land around national parks, is not so sacred as we thought. But the U.S. does not have enough lumber to be self-sufficient. If you're going to start putting tariffs on Canadian lumber, I mean, you want to talk about an affordable housing crisis, it's going to go through the roof. Construction costs are going to go through the roof, to say nothing of the construction workers and the fact they'll be gone too for a different reason. But rent, housing prices, see ya.
Yeah. Well, the other thing that I was reading about Canadian lumber, this is just kind of an interesting tidbit, right? But so our new growth for forests that we turn to for lumber production in the United States, we don't have a lot of old growth forest left, right? So our new growth forests, if you look, you can compare the lumber by tree rings. Okay. So if there's any, lumber nerds out there or environmental nerds, the tree rings are really tight together. It's stronger wood from old growth forests versus new growth forests, which are like, kind of almost like manufactured forests, replanted forests, where the wood is a little softer, right? And therefore burns quicker and is maybe not the best building material, right? So this old growth forest that Canada has, millions and millions of acres of, is actually quite valuable. And the product that we can produce is not even up to snuff with the product that, Canadian forests are churning out still in the millions of acres. And so that makes a difference, right? I'm not a builder, but I imagine that if I called a builder up and asked him to compare, cheap new growth forest lumber from the United States with expensive old growth forest lumber from Canada, he'd rather build with the good stuff, right? And that's going to matter.
Yeah.
It certainly matters when a house goes up in flames, right? Because that new growth burns quicker too.
Yeah, I wouldn't know anything about that.
Yeah, being in LA. Yeah. So Canada seems like a weird country to pick on. And yet, one of the talking points that Trump keeps spewing out there is, he called Trudeau the governor of the 51st state, right? He keeps referring to Canada as, you guys could join us, right? You could be the great 51st state of the United States. Obviously, right, we did try to invade Canada twice very early on in our history, American Revolution and War of 1812. We did try to capture it. It didn't work out. is Trump serious about annexing Canada? I mean, or is he just trolling Canada again, right? Like, because he trolls everyone, but then you never know whether he's serious. What do you think, Josh?
Yeah, I think he's serious. Um,
I think he might be, right? Like, I think he might be serious.
I mean, whether it's a serious endeavor or not, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, would it ever actually come to fruition? I don't know. I think we're all finding out that we need to expand our horizons of what's possible, kind of in a new geopolitical order where the
Yeah.
Putins and the Trumps and the Orbans are the ones calling the shots. But um, yeah, no,
Yeah.
I think it's very much a part of the game plan. I think these trade wars potentially are, in a way, laying the groundwork for justification of an attempt at annexation, right? Like,
Yeah.
who does Trump idolize? Presently, he idolizes Putin. What
Yeah.
is Putin trying to do? It,
Annex
it's
territory.
it's
Yeah.
it's the term is revanchism, but it's like regaining the old Soviet bloc. He
Yeah.
wants Ukraine to certainly expand Russia's geopolitical power, but also because Ukraine's got a lot of resources. And as you were just saying, what does Canada have?
A lot of resources. Yeah.
A lot
And
of
not
trees.
that many people, right? Like,
Yes. So, I mean, and again, it's like, well, who does he admire presently? Putin. Who does he admire historically? McKinley. What
yeah,
happened in the U.S. under McKinley?
that's a great point. Yeah.
Colonization of the Philippines,
That's right.
Hawaii,
The
uh,
Spanish American War, right?
Spanish-American War.
Yeah, our first modern imperial war, right? Like, yes, the Mexican War, it's its own thing, but it's under McKinley that we attempt to become an imperial power, right? Yeah.
Panama Canal, Guam,
Yeah.
Philippines.
Yeah.
What am I missing here?
Well, Cuba, Puerto
Oh, yeah,
Rico. Yeah.
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 So it's like, these discussions that almost seem farcical on the surface about Greenland, about the Panama Canal, about Canada being the 51st state. It almost seems like that's part of the long-term big time plan is to, if we're going to be self-sufficient as a country and take that seriously,
yeah.
we need to expand the borders of our country so
Yeah.
we can have the resources at hand to be self-sufficient. And what that basically ends up being is just a divide and conquer
Yeah.
among authoritarian powers, whether it's Russia or the US.
Yeah, so in a way, I mean, that's how Trump talks about Canada. It's certainly how he talks about Greenland. This idea of like resource extraction, right? Even his negotiations with Ukraine, you know, he's only going to negotiate with Ukraine. He's only going to support Ukraine if he can get mineral deals there. So it is this kind of resource-driven, like natural resource-driven neo-imperialism in a way, right? And that's why, the attack on Canada is both shocking, but also makes a whole lot of sense if you're thinking in terms of, expanding, becoming more self-sufficient as a country, and making sure you have enough resources. I mean, this is a this this is a potential like bombshell to throw in there. I'm not the first one to make this comparison, but Lebensraum is the term that Hitler uses, right? And it means living space, right? He wants to expand so that German people can be more self-sufficient. He wants to expand so that German people have more places to settle. And he's talking about Poland. He's talking about the Sudetenland when he uses that term, right? I mean, it's kind of exhausting to make these like pithy comparisons to Hitler, but that's the mindset in territorial expansion without ethics, right? I mean, let's just call it what it is. That's Lebensraum, right? That's resource extraction. That's taking other people's resources to make your America First agenda work, because we don't have enough timber. We don't have enough coffee. We don't have enough natural resources to be totally self-sufficient.
And I think what we're realizing now as a country and probably a world, I'll just say country. Um, I don't know. Like you grew up playing Risk with
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
I grew up playing Risk. I don't even know when did Risk start as a board game,
That's a
but
good question.
it just seems like as a kid growing up playing Risk, I was like, oh, this is how the world used to be. Um, and that must have been brutal to have all those wars over territory.
Right.
What we're realizing now is that maybe this kind of ahistorical belief in the, I don't know, 1990s, 2000, early 2000s. I mean, we had wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, but I don't think I personally, as someone who's has a baseline of historical literacy, I never once in a million years envisioned we'd be talking about invading Canada.
Yeah.
It's just
No, I didn't either. I didn't
it was
either.
not in my it was not on there was no realm of possibility in which that would be something we're talking about.
Yeah.
Um, maybe it was naive to say, "Hey, we won the Cold War," and the Berlin Wall's down. Good for democracy, good for freedom.
Yeah.
We're finding out I mean,
It's not how the world works, or not how the people leading it right now think it works anyway. Yeah.
yeah, but again, to get back to tariffs and kind of the globalized world, maybe to wrap it up, like if all of this stuff takes effect and somehow doesn't start World War III, global trade isn't going to stop.
Yeah.
Like if we as we being the US, if the US removes itself from the global network of trade,
Yeah.
it's not going to bring it to a halt. Canada will go find China as a
China. Yeah.
like you want to talk about countering China. China is just salivating at the mouth right now, thinking of all of the potential vacuums that are being created by the U.S. receding from the global geopolitical stage, whether it's
Yeah.
USA or these markets for
These trade deals. Yeah. Yeah.
China's going to benefit,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's clear, right? And you can tell yourself, well, that's okay. We're just going to stay insular over here. But kind of a resurgent China, or globally unchecked, doesn't sound like a good thing for anyone domestically or internationally. Um, and the US, yeah, totally leaving a vacuum, and also like signaling to anyone in Europe or Canada or our long-term trade partners and allies that you're going to have to find a new market for your goods, right? Because the US isn't going to cooperate, and that, I think, is maybe a problem going forward.
And it doesn't present any sense of stability or security. Like if you're an American manufacturer, I mean, part of that is our political process of electing people again and again.
Yeah.
Like who knows in 4 years if we're gonna feel the same way about all this as a country, as a federal government making these decisions.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's it's upsetting for sure. It's worrisome if these tariffs do ever end up all going into place, which it seems like they will now. I know there's been a lot of vacillating back and forth, but Trump seems intent on imposing these things now. And I think there's going to be severe economic consequences internationally and, more importantly, domestically to all of that, as we'll see play out in the coming months. Yeah.
On that happy note.
On that note, what are we going to talk about next time, Josh?
Well, I think we should tackle this question of the F word, being fascism. I know there's a lot of back and forth over whether it's overused, or not. I think we should discuss that.
Yeah, yeah. So maybe fascism in America. Fascism, what actually is it, right? There's obviously the rhetoric of calling everyone fascists, right? Like there's like, oh, you guys are fascists, you guys are fascists. This goes back to our free speech episode, right? Like,
Yeah.
Word Nazis or whatever was the thing at some point. I remember that phrase being tossed around, like that you're policing the way we speak and things like that. But no, what is actual fascism, and why is everyone or anyone talking about it today and comparing what we're seeing to it? So, I'm sure that some people will think we're crazy once we start talking about this, but I think it's an important word to talk about. It's an important political ideology to tackle, because it's looming there.
Mm-hmm.
And it, it is. I mean, I know you're a Lord of the Rings guy, right? But you think you've defeated fascism once and for all in 1945. I don't know. Did Sauron somehow survive and is now trying to reclaim the ring? We'll talk about it next time. I don't know.
I will withhold my commentary till next time.
All right. Well, we'll leave it there for now, and I'll see you next time, Josh. Good luck, getting that sleep once your family goes back into town.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Alrighty.
We'll see you.
Take care.